Dear children, here we are starting our social science lesson. The first lesson from history is saying about medieval world. Our first lesson is starting with a statement of J.D. Bernal. That's given there in our textbook. You please see that. The Middle Age was an era of the growth of civilization worldwide. The economic transformation brought by the medieval life and its characteristics were the causes of the revolutionary changes in the 16th century. These are the words of J.D. Bernal. In that statement, J.D. Bernal says there were a revolutionary change in economic sector during medieval period. What was the reason for that? All these we are going to study in this chapter. Here, the medieval world, medieval period in the history, that is termed as a period between 5th century CE to 15th century CE. At the same time, this time period from 5th century CE to 16th century CE is not same everywhere. The medieval period is not the same everywhere in the world. In the world history, there were medieval periods in the Europe, in America, in Africa, and in Asian continents. But the time period were not same. That were on the basis of political circumstances, political characteristics. The political characteristics of the medieval period were almost the same everywhere. It was a type of feudalism. The political characteristics, it was almost like a feudal rule. That's why a period that is termed as medieval period. That period is time period is not the same everywhere, but the political characteristics are almost same. But the political authority was not same. In Africa, in Asia, in Europe, and in America, the political authorities were different. That is, we are studying in this chapter. In the beginning, we are going to study about two Roman empires. Two Roman empires. Eastern Roman Empire and the Holy Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, the ancient Roman Empire, it was very vast. The ancient Roman Empire, it was very vast. That's why for the administration purpose, for a comfort in administration, the early Roman Empire or the ancient Roman Empire, it was divided into two by the Emperor Diocletian. It was divided into two as Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire. The capital of Western Roman Empire, it was Rome, and the capital of Eastern Roman Empire, it was Constantinople. Constantinople. This Constantinople later became known as Byzantine. That's why this Eastern Roman Empire was also called as Byzantine Empire. Byzantine Empire. A question raised here, why the Eastern Roman Empire was also called as Byzantine Empire. What's the answer here? The Constantinople, the capital of Eastern Roman Empire, was also called as Byzantine. That's why the Eastern Roman Empire is also called as Byzantine Empire. What's the name of Byzantine or Constantinople now? Now it's Istanbul. Istanbul. That's the present name of Constantinople or Byzantine. Important emperor of Eastern Roman Empire was Justinian. Justinian. Few words of Will Durant about King Justinian, that's given there in our textbook. You please see that. History will judicially forget the wars of Justinian and remember him for his laws. History will judicially forget the wars of Justinian and remember him for his laws. It was the words of Will Durant in his Story of Civilization. From the words of Will Durant, it is very clear that the major contribution of King Justinian was his code of law, Corpus Juris Civilis. It was the name of his code of law. He codified the existing Roman laws. And this became a model for different nations, sovereign nations. About a chart is given there in our textbook that is explaining different parts of this law. You please see that. The major principles of Corpus Juris Civilis were reasoning, justice, and generosity. And three parts of Corpus Juris Civilis were the Code, the Digest, and the Institutes. The Code, Digest, and the Institute. The Code means a book. The book containing the laws prevailed in Roman Empire. The book containing the laws prevailed in the Roman Empire was called as the Code. And another part, it was the Digest. It was the book which records the opinions of jurists regarding the laws. The opinions of jurists that had contained in the Digest. And institutes, the small books intended for study of law. These were the three parts of Corpus Juris Civilis. King Justinian or the Emperor Justinian was very strong and a good administrator, but his successors were not strong like him. That's why after Justinian, the Eastern Roman Empire began to decline. The Eastern Roman Empire began to decline after King Justinian. The Eastern Roman Empire collapsed in the 15th century after the Turks, when the Turks captured Constantinople. When the Turks captured Constantinople, the Eastern Roman Empire collapsed completely. And another Roman Empire that we are studying here, that is Holy Roman Empire. Holy Roman Empire. The map of Holy Roman Empire that's given there in our textbook. You please see that. We had already studied that there were two Roman empires. Diocletian had divided the ancient Roman Empire as Western Roman Empire and Eastern Roman Empire. We studied about the Eastern Roman Empire now. And the Western Roman Empire declined because of the continuous attack of Germanic tribes. It collapsed. Then several tribal attacks were there, several tribal groups were there, and among these tribal groups, Franks, and another a tribal group, they established an empire in the place of Western Roman Empire. Charlemagne was the emperor of Frankish Empire. Charlemagne. This Charlemagne saved Pope Leo III from the attack of Lombards tribal group, and in return Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne as Holy Roman Emperor. Then Charlemagne's Frankish Empire became known as Holy Roman Empire. Holy Roman Empire. His empire became Holy Roman Empire, and Charlemagne became Holy Roman Emperor. You can see the picture of Charlemagne in our textbook. You please see that. Charlemagne was a great conqueror. He was very strong. He was a strong ruler. He introduced a centralized administration system in his empire. For the local administration, he appointed counts, a group of officers for the local administration. And to check or to monitor these counts, and another secret officials, secret groups were also there. They were called as missi dominici. Missi dominici. Several charitable works were also done by Charlemagne. He had established several educational institutions in his empire, and as a result of the establishment of the educational institutions, a new awakening in the field of knowledge that happened in the period of Charlemagne in the Holy Roman Empire. And this is called as, this progress in education that happened at the time of Charlemagne was called as Carolingian Renaissance. Carolingian Renaissance, because Charlemagne was from Carolingian dynasty. He was an emperor of Carolingian dynasty. That's why the Renaissance or the progress of education at the time of Charlemagne was known as Carolingian Renaissance. Charlemagne was a strong emperor, a strong conqueror, but his successors were not efficient like him. That's why later, after Charlemagne, his empire, or the Frankish Empire or the Holy Roman Empire, was divided and later collapsed. And all these are about the Eastern Roman Empire and the Holy Roman Empire. And we will study about the empires in Asia and Africa, the Arab Empire and Mali Empire, like that type of empires in another class. Now we are going to wind up. Namaskaram.